3rd and 15. Pressure comes from deep that time.
So the Seattle Seahawks, they just made NFL history. Not just because they brought home the Lombardi Trophy, or the fact that they did so in one of the most dominant performances we've ever seen, but numbers like these, I mean, they had pretty much become a weekly occurrence. Because 2 shootouts in a 6-week span with Los Angeles aside, no other team across the league had an answer for this defense. The production on the front line was second to no one. Play behind that in the secondary, you could argue just as effective. But flip back over to that very first snap we were looking at. Because if you want to talk about the coaching side in all of this, that's just as critical as the players. But what if I told you it was actually a rookie that ultimately opened Pandora's box for this defense?
3rd and 15. Pressure comes from deep that time. And he gets there with a sack. So the secondary's been in the backfield. That's Witherspoon again.
They have 2 guys out there, Witherspoon and Emmanwori, coming with pressure off that edge.
Now, to fully understand the kind of impact a player like Nick Emmanwori can have on a defense, you got to know what exactly he brings to the table for a play caller. Let's just start with some of the basics here. At 6'3", 220, he's an absolute specimen in the secondary. He possesses great length and range to force those tight windows in the pass game. Very solid coordination and footwork, especially when considering his size. But above all else, we can't have this conversation without highlighting the play style.
One of the commonalities between these two teams, stability in the offensive line. Oh, Emmanwori taking the legs out from under Tyler Algier.
If you're a guy that's going to be part of the double team and you're climbing to that second level, you got to have your eyes there.
To keep it as simple as I possibly can, Nick Emmanwori is a linebacker in a defensive back's body. And that's also why he's the key to this team's engine. Just think about what he can add from the lens of a basic NFL defense. You've got 4 up front, set of 3 linebackers, and 4 defensive backs. Very commonly referred to as base defense. But the second you go to sub one of those linebackers out for a 5th defensive back, now you've shifted personnel into a nickel-style defense. 5 DBs, 5 makes a nickel. Well, the Seahawks played from this structure more than almost anyone in football. And that hybrid ability of a player like Nick Emmanwori directly relates to this. When you've got a guy that can do it all as that nickel, you simultaneously affect both the run and the pass game. Because most teams, when attempting to incorporate that 5th DB, they see their defense in the ground game worsen. But Seattle's not your typical run-of-the-mill team.
But they rely on this front, the defensive linemen and linebackers, to shed blocks, destroy blocks, and make plays in the run game. They're so elite at it. You can't run the ball, so they maintain their pass defense with their structure of everybody deep. Very suffocating for an offense.
I mean, this 4th and 1 rep from the divisional matchup against the Niners speaks volumes. A jumbo-style look for San Francisco. You could even make the case that Seattle's favoring to play the pass on the back end, and they never even stood a chance. But all we've gone through so far is just individual snaps. So why don't we jump 1 week forward? Y'all remember this matchup? Pretty much an instant classic, and very widely referred to as the game of the year. Well, a sequence like this is exactly where you see Nick Emmanwori's down-to-down impact. Now, it's a 1st and 10 just outside the red zone for Los Angeles. And not only do you see them walking up to the line in a 3 tight end set, and on top of that, pretty much everything else about this screaming that it's a run, with Stafford taking the snap from under center, but yet again, Seattle is completely set up for the pass. 5 secondary players, and pretty much 6 in the box, with Emmanwori kind of creeping right along that edge. Yet somehow, none of it's a disadvantage. Now, Ernest Jones ends up making a pretty solid read to bounce it outside, and partially plug one of those open gaps. But take a look at Emmanwori. That is a 3-inch, 30-pound discrepancy between him and the tight end that's blocking him. He works to square him up, and then just sheds him the second he sees Kyron commit one way or the other. So partially due to Emmanwori, now you're looking at 2nd and long. And if you put yourself in the shoes of Matthew Stafford real quick, if you've got man coverage, you think you've got a mismatch.
Here's Stafford back to throw. Pocket breaks down, throws high, and it's incomplete. There is Nick Emmanwori, who's had a sensational rookie year on the pass breakup.
Yeah, that's a matchup that should favor this Hall of Fame receiver and Hall of Fame quarterback. Emmanwori, the rookie, he's such a big body, and with that length, see his right arm get in there. Very tough to complete passes on him.
Now you try to target him, and he proceeds to lock down one of the best receivers in the entire sport. It was second and long. Now all of a sudden, it becomes a very unlikely third down look. And everything you're seeing, that is the Nick Emmanwori effect in action. You've not only survived, but you've managed to suffocate their offense on first and second down with 5 defensive backs. If you get your opponent to third and a mile, why wouldn't you just add a 6th guy to the back and completely flood the secondary? And I do understand that, in the grand scheme of things, these tiny adjustments and personnel decisions don't seem like much. I mean, what? The coverage ends up doing its job, the front 4 gets home and causes chaos, and bigger picture, you hold off LA early second quarter to putting 3 on the board rather than 7. Now you can say what you want, but you tell me how critical those 4 points ended up being. When you're talking about the most ideal fit for a player at the nickel position, it really is a jack-of-all-trades requirement. Just think of players around the league like Kyle Hamilton for Baltimore, Jalen Petrie down in Houston, even Cooper DeJean for a more recent example. Having a chess piece in this category that's able to match up with any skill position player on the field, no less on any given snap, it's a luxury that really can't be overstated from a play caller's perspective. He basically simplifies everything in the sense that you can just constantly move him around the chessboard. Think about how, on a do-or-die down like this, what that can add next to the best front 4 in football.
This entire defensive line is just ferocious.
4th and 2. Purdy in trouble and sacked. Leonard Williams and the Seahawks take over. It is an avalanche here in Seattle. This defense #1 for a reason, and they look every bit the part tonight.
Now, what's the point of me showing you this play? Where did Nick Emmanwori even have the slightest bit of impact? Well, a big portion of this play actually had to do with his alignment. There's not a defensive back in football that set up in the box more than Nick Emmanwori last season, which basically just refers to the space between both offensive tackles, or even both defensive ends with a linebacker's room. More than half of his snaps, he's typically lurking in this area. Now, you'll also probably notice that the running back's got a chip tag, and that's to potentially block any blitz that's going to be coming downhill at the quarterback. And if you're in his shoes, just look at what's in front of you. First things first, you've got those 4 defensive linemen that are stretched completely across the line, but then there's blitz threats scattered all over behind them. There's a linebacker over the center, Emmanwori's just kind of teasing that tackle outside next to the edge, and then there's even a safety that's going to come creeping down last second. 3 red flags on that side of the formation, and not a single one of them bites. So by only utilizing a 4-man rush, you've not only occupied 4 bodies with half of the line, but you've generated 2 one-on-ones for the guys lined up opposite. And Nick Emmanwori is a force multiplier when it comes to this tactic.
Yeah, so think about it, right? There's 2 ways to attack quarterbacks. You can rush your front 4, and that allows you to keep 7 on the back end intact. But because Seattle is able to get pressure on the quarterback with such a low blitz percentage, it's like they're blitzing 5. It feels like that to the quarterback, but they also get to keep 7 in coverage, right? So that's where that, like, 12th man.
Now, when you watch that rep back again, what looked familiar to you? Well, this pretty much to a T is the name of the game. Different style of attack, yet the exact same result. And before you knew it, once we hit the back half of the season, Nick Emmanwori became a focal point for opponents. No cornerback in the entire league finished with more pressures in the pocket. Again, I'll say it until I'm blue in the face, you cannot contain a skill set like his to just sit back in the secondary. By the time we hit December, I mean, this guy was anything and everything but a secret anymore. Because all these teams, they not only slowly began to anticipate him rushing the quarterback, but they'd even prioritize targeting his side of the blitz in their pass protection, which sometimes also worked to their own detriment, given the opportunities in free lanes that it would create for others. If you'd want to summarize all of this from the lens of Mike Macdonald, It's pretty much exactly the point we just heard from Greg Olsen earlier. Every opponent's different, but you're constantly seeing how far you can actually push the envelope up front in the trenches, while both still maintaining and leaning on your lockdown coverage. Let me show all of you 2 plays side by side that really emphasize Emmanwori as a chess piece. First one's another rep from their divisional matchup against San Francisco, and what do you see yet again at the bottom of the formation? Macdonald's got Emmanwori lurking and kinda creeping up closer and closer near the line of scrimmage, so the Niners actually motioned over both extra blockers onto his side of the line. Now even on top of those 4 defensive linemen, the call up front on a 4th and short scenario seems to be a double B-gap blitz. So now imagine you're Brock Purdy for a second. You recognize 2 bodies coming at you from the secondary. You know for a fact that you've got blocking numbers on that split of the field to at least hold them off. Your best bet is probably to locate that pair of routes out opposite and hit the void being created as quick as possible. All that preparation just to assure that a potential blitz won't destroy this play, and absolutely none of it ends up making a difference. Demarcus Lawrence as an edge rusher ends up dropping out into what essentially becomes a 4-deep, 2-low style of his own. This one snap almost perfectly sums up this entire game.
4th down, it's Purdy. Pressure in his face again. Emmanwori gets away. Purdy running for his life. Chased out. Throws as far as he can take it, and it's knocked down. Incomplete.
Held the ball longer than any quarterback in a game since 2016. And that's not by intention. That's by good coverage on defense.
The versatility of Nick Emmanwori's skill sets, that's the key to the engine. Offensive play callers and quarterbacks alike, every rep can have a different outcome. And because of that, you can't really afford to take your eyes off him. One week he might be the core piece of Mike Macdonald's looks to attempt to generate pressure on the front line, and the very next he could be a glorified decoy that's serving the majority of the snaps and coverage. Whether he's physically wrecking the game himself or not, just his presence on the field is enough to create all that chaos. If he's not the trap, then he's the bait. And this snap from Super Bowl 60, compared to the first one prior, is a perfect example. Now before anything else, you remember that coverage that we saw Seattle running in the first snap that we looked at? It was along the lines of that 4-deep, 2-low zone, but the major caveat with it was that they had an edge rusher dropping into the secondary. Well, turns out that's pretty much an identical look as to what you're seeing on this rep late in the game. But one slight change, Nick Emmanwori's not being sent on the blitz this time around. He's still bluffing as if he is, but he's actually lining up on the opposite side of the field of his assignment and is disguising himself before pushing out to be the other half's lower zone. Play designs like these, they can make or break games. And with the Lombardi on the line, you can make the case that he had the greatest impact on this field while barely even touching the stat sheet.
In and out. They did get a substitution in there.
And they bring a pressure as well. And they get a knockdown as Witherspoon came under pressure. And Uchenna Nwosu is going the distance for a touchdown. One of the best defensive performances in Super Bowl history put up by these Seahawks tonight.
Now within this video, I wanted to cover the full year sample size with this guy. And that we did, but the final game of the year in itself was an absolute clinic in terms of how to effectively utilize Nick Emmanwori as a target. So if you also want to see Mike Macdonald's wire-to-wire game plan in just Super Bowl 60, I've already got a full separate breakdown covering that matchup, and you'll see it here playing in about 15 seconds. But either way, I appreciate y'all, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.